with the King reportedly ruling out any suggestion of a part-time role for the Duke of Sussex. Our Europe correspondent Ben Downey reports.
In a stunning twist that has sent shockwaves through the royal world, Meghan Markle is now pleading directly with King Charles after a final, heartbreaking decision from the palace. For months, tension had simmered behind closed doors, but insiders say the King's latest ruling has drawn a bold, immovable line one Meghan never saw coming. Behind the royal walls, the decision she never believed would arrive has now been delivered quietly and privately, with a level of finality so absolute that witnesses said there was no room left for debate, persuasion, or charm. Senior palace insiders revealed that King Charles has made what they are calling his final decision about Meghan, a choice that not only closes a door but ends an entire chapter one many within the monarchy never thought he would dare to close. In an environment often clouded by clickbait culture, the words exchanged in those high-ceiling palace rooms were not loud or emotional. They were calm, deliberate, and spoken in the firm, quiet tone Charles uses only when his mind is fully made up. In the days leading up to this moment, pressure had been building on him slowly at first, then more intensely over the weekend because in allowing Meghan not just a marriage or a title but an entire long, chaotic, and unpredictable chapter since the moment she entered royal life, the King had already shown her more patience and space than many believe he ever would. I end this account. The chapter that many believed Meghan did not deserve to keep open has now finally been closed. And when the King's final decision reached Montecito, the reaction was immediate. Meghan reportedly froze, her team went into panic mode, and Harry was completely blindsided. For the first time in a long while, the palace moved with absolute clarity, showing no hesitation, no loopholes, and no fear of the public backlash that was sure to follow. For years Meghan had continued using her HRH styling despite being asked not to by Queen Elizabeth II, something insiders say deeply frustrated Prince William. But this time King Charles was not trying to smooth things over, compromise, or keep the peace as he had done for decades. Instead, he made an irreversible choice that fully closed the door, beginning with what the palace reportedly calls a necessary final boundary, one Meghan never imagined he would enforce. Many forget William once said that Harry appearing at the coronation would be extraordinary, a sign of how far the family had fractured, and longtime royal watchers suggested there might be no way back. To understand what pushed Charles to act, insiders say one must look at the quiet developments behind palace walls over many months. This was not triggered by a single headline, documentary, interview, speech, or podcast moment, but by a slow, steady, and impossible-to-ignore pattern. Senior advisors had been monitoring escalating concerns long before the public noticed, with Charles allegedly growing uneasy about how Meghan presented herself in appearances, brand teasers, and public messaging that subtly referenced royal life and blurred the line between her personal brand and the royal legacy, positioning herself as though she still held an active royal connection despite stepping back. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, William was reportedly preparing a campaign that could lead to minor royals losing titles, signaling a tightening and streamlining of the monarchy structure. At first, Charles stayed calm, watching, listening, and hoping the situation would resolve itself, but then came what insiders call the final wave of warning signs. A new brand launch, a polished speech, a series of high-profile meetings, and an unexpected international campaign that alarmed senior officials once they grasped its implications. One issue hit the King particularly hard: Catherine, and advisors warned that Meghan was continuing to draw from the monarchy's power, symbols, history, and prestige despite having stepped away, creating a potential threat to the family's image that could quickly spiral if not contained. One advisor reportedly told him bluntly, "Your Majesty, this will not stop on its own," and at that moment the tone shifted, with every top advisor from communications to legal to protocol agreeing that the monarchy needed to act quickly and decisively, not next month or after the next controversy, but immediately, because if they did not set a firm boundary now, they feared Meghan could reshape the royal narrative by tomorrow. Behind locked doors and away from the public eye, King Charles made a decision that insiders say was years in the making, one that led directly to the moment Meghan heard the words she never believed would come from the palace again. "It's over." Once the warnings reached him, Charles quietly shifted the palace into a controlled, almost silent lockdown, nothing dramatic or messy, just a calm but unmistakably serious response. Sources say he began a series of intense, high-level meetings lasting several days, each heavier and more urgent than the last, involving the Privy Council, senior communications leaders, legal strategists, protocol experts, and advisors who surface only when the monarchy faces a long-term threat. Entering the room with a calm but unshakable firmness that suggested he already knew the outcome, Charles listened as documents were spread across tables, timelines examined, and Meghan's public appearances, brand strategies, interviews, and subtle references to royal life were analyzed line by line. Advisors warned that if he did not act now, he risked losing control of the royal narrative, with Meghan's rising influence in the US potentially creating global confusion. Two versions of the monarchy, one official and one unofficial. Charles heard every word without anger or impatience, only steady determination, and by the end of the final meeting the energy had shifted. The palace would no longer wait for the next documentary, the next leak, or the next polished appearance. Instead, they would act decisively, with a final decision that could not be undone. Those present say the king ended the meeting with a single quiet sentence that felt like the closing of a chapter. This chapter must end. Within hours, the machinery of the monarchy moved, papers were drafted, notifications prepared, and a discreet courier assigned. When Charles's decision reached Montecito, it came without ceremony or public announcement, delivered privately and unmistakably for Meghan alone. According to those close to the moment, she was stunned, not angry at first, just frozen as she read the message once, then again, before disbelief gave way to panic. Insiders say her voice shifted as she demanded answers, asked who had approved the decision, and questioned whether Harry had been told, insisting there had to be a misunderstanding. But unlike past palace actions, subtle distancing, quiet corrections, behind-the-scenes adjustments, this one was absolute. No negotiation, no appeal, no softened language. It was the end, delivered exactly as the king intended. Those present said Meghan never imagined this moment would come, believing the palace would always leave a small window open for her, a chance to return, to rewrite the story, to rebuild what was broken. Instead, the decision slammed that window shut for good. To end this fictional account, Meghan began pacing around the room, her steps restless and uneven, her voice shaking as she struggled to understand what had just happened and who might have influenced the king into making such a firm, irreversible decision. When the realization finally settled that this was not a warning, not a suggestion, but a final declaration, her entire demeanor shifted, and tears, rising frustration, and a deep sense of betrayal took over as she felt a fear that this was a turning point she could never undo. For the first time since stepping away from royal life, she wasn't just being ignored or sidelined, she felt completely cut off, and every frantic phone call, rushed message, and attempt to control the narrative revealed how shaken she truly was. Meanwhile, Harry faced his own emotional reckoning. Told of the king's decision before Meghan, not out of favoritism but out of courtesy, he reacted with a blend of shock, frustration, and a painful understanding that he could no longer protect the two worlds he had tried so hard to balance since 2018. In this story, he asked his father for time, reconsideration, and a softer approach, but Charles remained calm, steady, and unmoving, making it clear that this boundary was final. When Harry finally shared the news with Meghan, the atmosphere in their home shifted immediately as both grappled with the emotional weight of the moment, and Harry felt the familiar and painful pressure of being trapped between two worlds that no longer wished to meet. As he wondered whether his father had truly made his last and final call, the future for Meghan in this fictional narrative became sharply defined by a formal directive containing 3 uncompromising points. She would no longer be allowed to reference or hint at royal connections in upcoming projects without explicit permission. All remaining informal privileges or courtesies would be revoked, and from this moment on, she would stand entirely on her own, without the palace stepping in to soften public controversies or disputes. And this fictional narrative, Meghan found herself without the silent support the palace once provided, a reality one advisor bluntly framed not as punishment but as protection for the institution, though whispers within the palace carried a sharper tone. This was not merely about limits but about sealing them permanently. For Meghan, everything changes with this finality, and for those around the king, the message is unmistakable: this chapter is over. The strict written directive tells only half the story. The other half is delivered through the signature royal silence that has long unsettled outsiders, and in this case unsettled Meghan most of all, as King Charles offered no explanation, no soft preface, no gesture of reconciliation, letting the document speak for itself. Inside the palace, everyone understood the shift. The monarchy was no longer playing defense, no longer relying on silence as protection but as boundary. By revoking privileges, restricting the use of royal identity, and refusing to intervene in her future controversies, the Crown made clear that the institution would no longer serve as a springboard for personal branding. It wasn't anger or revenge but structure, precedent, and control of the royal narrative, redefining Meghan not as a royal figure but as a private individual with all the boundaries that status demands. Analysts in this story argue the implications reach far beyond public drama, touching the next decade, the next generation, and the monarchy's long-term stability, as the rise of influencer culture, celebrity royalty overlap, and the monetization of personal narratives exposed pressures the institution was never built to withstand. Meghan, with her Hollywood background and global reach, became the clearest example of how dangerously blurred those lines could become, prompting advisors to warn that boundaries must be set now before there were none left later. And with the king's decisive action, attention turns to Meghan's next move. Supporters view the decision as harsh, critics as overdue, and the palace as necessary, but everyone agrees on one thing. Meghan never stays silent under pressure. The moment she realized the king's order was absolute and irreversible, her team sprang into action, holding an emergency call with US-based advisors within hours as PR specialists, legal strategists, and brand managers scrambled to respond. In her world, silence equals defeat, and options quickly surfaced: a sympathetic public statement, a major interview, a documentary, or a high-profile speech hinting at institutional challenges. The most concerning idea, insiders say, was leveraging upcoming brand projects to reclaim the narrative, a strategy she had used before when under pressure, leaving those close to the situation tense about what might come next. And this fictional account, Meghan's advisors were not preparing a calm response but a calculated counterattack, because Charles's new restrictions meant she could no longer reference the royal family without risking backlash, forcing her to rebuild her public strategy. Without any royal association. Some advisors urged caution while others urged retaliation, but all agreed that if Meghan felt cornered, she would not stay silent. For her, this was more than a setback, it was a battle over narrative, the arena where she held her greatest power. The moment that would be remembered most wasn't a confrontation or public announcement, but a quiet sentence spoken behind closed doors after the final paperwork had been sealed, when someone stepped out of the room, took a breath, and said, "It's over." It was not emotional or dramatic, just final. Charles's decision was not symbolic or temporary but a permanent structural boundary closing a chapter Meghan once believed she could revisit, signaling no reconciliation, no return, and no second chances. For Meghan, it meant navigating the future without royal protection. For Harry, it widened the divide between the family he was born into and the one he built. For Charles, it marked a shift from patience to preservation, and for the monarchy, it represented a historic moment. But as with any monumental decision, it didn't stay secret for long. Whispers escaped the palace, leaks surfaced, reporters appeared with pointed questions, and international media sensed the story like sharks circling the water, turning "final decision" from speculation into global headlines. Morning shows debated it, commentators called it the end of an era, and editors raced for insider quotes as sympathetic and harsh narratives collided, all agreeing the relationship between Meghan and the monarchy had reached a permanently fractured point. In Montecito, panic shifted to damage control, then hardened into strategy as Meghan's team monitored headlines, tracked trends, and prepared for a global wave that could affect her image, partnerships, and control of her story. One insider described it as a reputational earthquake capable of reshaping public perception for years, while the palace maintained a silence that spoke louder than any statement. Meghan, however, was not about to remain quiet, and behind the gates of Montecito a bold, calculated, potentially explosive counter-strategy began forming. Understanding that hesitation is dangerous when the narrative turns, she pivoted quickly, assembling a detailed long-term plan for influence and survival, dividing the crisis into segments: public image, brand positioning, media openings, legal boundaries, and emotional leverage, while her team set up a full-scale war room tracking analytics and social sentiment in real time. And this fictional narrative, Meghan's team monitored analytics, news cycles, and influencer reactions as they mapped out 3 potential paths forward: a quiet reset, appearing calm and composed in public to subtly shift sympathy her way; a narrative reclamation, using a controlled media appearance or documentary segment to highlight systemic obstacles and frame the king's decision as part of the institution she left behind; or the direct counterattack, delivering a bold statement hinting at injustice and subtly challenging the monarchy's authority, an approach insiders say her team quietly favors, knowing that controversy generates attention, and attention generates influence. Yet Meghan's greatest challenge is not the palace itself but the strict new rules Charles has imposed, which prevent her from hinting at royal identity or symbolism without risking backlash or legal consequences, striking at the heart of a brand built partly on royal proximity. As one strategist put it, she must now grow her platform without the very element that once fueled her rise. Behind the scenes, Meghan is planning her next move with precision, ensuring every step responds to the king's boundaries without crossing them, knowing a single misstep could widen the divide while a calculated choice could help her regain control and reshape public perception. And somewhere in Montecito, amid strategy sessions and crisis meetings, she makes a decision her team did not expect. One insider say could even force the king to reconsider his stance.